Howdy. Welcome one, welcome all.
Greetings. Welcome to The Bird. I'm The Bird, aka Colibri. And this is the bee. The busy bee. I'd like to lead us in a breath before we begin, if everyone would like to join me. Thank you.
This is episode 2. How's your week been since the last time we checked in?
Isn't this 3?
Well, yeah, I mean, but you wanted to do the 0, 1, 2,
Yeah,
3,
this is our 4th filming, so from episode 0, this is number 3.
Right, I just didn't know how you wanted to go about work, but I'm just going by, this is number 3, but it's the 4th one, yeah, but...
But you said 2.
Oh,
so
did
we're at 3, everyone.
Oh,
we're
my
at
bad.
3. We've been at this every week for 4 consecutive weeks now, working our way into our flows. I'm in a very mellow and centered, rooted place today, it being the second day of my Moonses, as I call it personally. Some would call it their period, menses.
Try to take the man out of the periods, huh? Menses.
It's just what resonates with me. I was just free bleeding in the garden. I was bringing that up on Instagram yesterday about wanting to start a conversation about free bleeding and about Moonses and about the moon cycles of the feminine.
I mean, it's definitely better than sticking toxic tampons in there, right?
Oh, most definitely. And everyone has their own methods and things available to them and conveniences they like to engage in. And
Don't ladies get like toxic shock syndrome type of thing from that if you like leave it in there too long?
TSS. Some people you don't have to leave it in long at all.
Woo! You could also put like drugs on there, right? Isn't that a good way to absorb some drugs to the yoni?
Yes, this is true. Actually,
Quick absorption.
okay. So because Mr. Son of Laughter, Isaac, there was a girl that I was on sheriff's detail with once upon an old lifetime of mine. And she told me about sneaking drugs into jail, into one of those metal pill holders that are on a keychain. And she had taken it up into her womb space and ended up with an infection that caused one of your favorite subjects, the blue waffle.
Ooh.
Which I had never heard of before, this story. And
I didn't know it was a real thing.
I really wasn't something I wanted to be educated on, but I'm still grateful for her story and her candor and and the warning of that, to be, not that I didn't know, but to be very careful with metals in the body.
They don't search that? I thought that's like a whole thing, like demoralizing aspect of prison or jail.
Cavity searches are, I hear that they only happen if there's there has to be some sort of probable cause for that.
Oh.
I hear drug addicts endure that quite often. Though that's not the direction I wanted to take.
You want to talk about coughing and spreading?
Here we are, story time.
We like tangents, so.
We do. But on the subject of menses and free bleeding into the garden, being deeply rooted in my root chakra and sacral energy, I wanted to wear the orange. I felt a lot of orange light today around emotion and feeling, but I wanted to bring up the subject of compost. Where did my compost book go? Do you see it anywhere?
No. What book is it? The Secret Life
It's right there. Would you mind getting it for me? Yes, The Secret Life of Compost. I'm going to reference books today because I need a little bit of assistance but I wanted to speak on Malcolm Beck. I have a few books to mention in our book drops, and this is The Secret Life of Compost. It's by Michael Beck. He's a fellow Texan as well, and he is all about nature over chemicals and has really helped even the most mainstream, even the NFL, reshape their thoughts around natural turf and the micro-universe of dirt and compost and waste and death. People like to celebrate the life around themselves, but they don't understand that whenever you walk into the forest or you're walking along the ground, there's life, there's death, and then there's old, old death. And just like myself, being a microcosm of my environment, I'm going through the shedding myself right now, shedding of my uterine lining, of the great death of my unused baby house. And I really appreciate the way that Malcolm speaks to living earth and the cycles of life. And he's just a real down-home, simple man that educated himself on not only the evolution of, realizing that planet Earth is a gigantic organism itself. That's a concept that Mr. Beck expands upon hauntingly beautiful epic style, I'd like to say. So if you're interested in compost, and it all begins with compost for us, especially like my bestest, dearest soul sister and best friend, Frances, who is now embarking on a new journey, Wildflower on Tour. You can find her on Instagram. We all met through compost. We all met through the beauty of compost, and I'm ever grateful for that. I was just playing in the compost yesterday and spreading out a heap pile of compost that I was experimenting with doing in-bed composting over the winter, and I got to spread it all out in a couple of my beds and prep for these seeds that I'm about to sow. It's lovely. Bleed right into it.
So what was the takeaway from the book? Or like, what did you, what's like what'd you learn from it that you didn't know already?
Oh, goodness. There's so much. There's so much to cover there.
I remember just looking at this cover, there's a huge pile.
Mm-hmm.
Which ours is never that big, like a mound, but I remember seeing a video of a guy who, to make black garlic, to ferment garlic, he'd, because compost, to like break it down, needs like a constant interior heat temperature, and then and to ferment garlic, it needs that. And I remember he'd stick these jars in there, and they'd be like, I think for garlic, it needed to be like 140 degrees, I think I remember. And he'd stick it in there, and like, I don't forget how long you have to leave it in there, but the garlic would come out black.
Yes.
And it's like super fermented and like just a superfood essentially, but
yeah, that was Rhodes. That was from Rhodes' channel that he has. Justin Rhodes. He was featured on Justin Rhodes. I'm trying to recall his name, but he was a guest. You could find that on Justin Rhodes' channel, Black Garlic, and I think that's on one of his. He was interviewing another farm where he goes on tour and he interviews other farms. That's where we first started toying with the idea of black garlic, and I went ahead and stuck a jar of ours. It's supposed to be about 140 degrees from what I remember. I need to circle back to that experiment and do that again, because there's so many benefits to black garlic.
yeah, I don't think ours made it, but we were kind of like half-heartedly trying, but I don't remember it turning black or anything. But
well, it certainly did ferment and get really sweet, and I think it was about halfway there. I did cook with it. I remember that much. That was years and years ago, back in the beginning when we had so many projects going that kind of went to the wayside. How are you?
I'm great. I book I listened to an audiobook, but I listened to this book Ishmael, which is apparently like a classic. I think it came out in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But it was very I don't know, it was very quite the story of quite the way to way to change your perspective on something through like story. They said it's through like a Socratic conversation through a talking gorilla, which it's a little weird, but if you just get past that, you're like just absorbing the info. It's super great, but it's kind of talking about how like it starts out with this gorilla. There's like an ad in the paper, and it says teacher seeks pupil. If you want to save the world or something, like must apply in person. And the guy's like jaded because he kind of already gave that up, and he's like, "Where is this when I was younger? I needed this." And so he's like, "I'll go check it out." And then there's like a gorilla in an office, and then long story short, yeah, he breaks it down the world into like takers and leavers, and takers being like kind of the Western, just the world after agriculture, and the road we took from that, and then leavers being like the hunter gatherer types that kind of live with in harmony with the world. And it was super fascinating because it was talking about myth, like culture and story. Like our culture is something that it's like a how a group of people enact their story, and their story is their place in the world, and in relation to the environment and God, and so like and then the gorilla was asking the human guy, he's like, so what's your story, like what's your culture's myth? And he's like, well, we don't really have any. And then so he like makes him think on it, which is good because then he kind of like it's kind of coming from your perspective too, because as a Western person, you're like, yeah, we don't really have any myths or anything, and then so he talks about, he's like, I guess our creation myth is 14 billion years ago there was a big bang, and then 6 billion years ago the Earth was formed, and I don't remember, then the microorganisms form and evolve into like reptiles, and like fish, and then reptiles, and like mammals, and then like apes, and then humans, and that's kind of the end, like we're the pinnacle, and like we're like the great achievement of it, and then through that mindset, being if we're the pinnacle, it means like everything's here for us, like everything's under our domain, and like we can do whatever we want to enact our vision of stuff, and which and by creating our own paradise, how that makes we kind of by trying to make our own paradise, essentially we're destroying the actual world in it, because we just think we can mess with anything and not have any consequences. And so it's super interesting just thinking of in contrast to that, to the levers and the harmony of people. And then like one time he's like talking, he does this great analogy of like your civilization or culture being like a flying craft, like the early aeronauts as he called it. And so our culture's on this, thing, kind of this craft we made, and we're taking off. We're making all these great stuff, and everything's going smooth and flying. And occasionally we'll look down and see like wreckage of other aircrafts that were there before us, which, is kind of like analogous to like ruins, like the Anasazi people, or like Mayans or Egyptians. And
Mm-hmm.
or like, how those early attempts, to how futile. Like we're gonna do it way better and smarter. And then how that eventually like the law catches up, of the law being like of what do they call it? Because they were like relating it to gravity and how something like that can apply to us and how we live. But it was like the law of like limited competition, and like how we like take competition out and how that affects everything else, and try to only makes like we're a head dog. And then eventually, like we're kind of our craft gets lower and lower, and like so we keep pedaling harder and pushing more stuff, and like just more production. And then eventually how that's just we're gonna end up, eventually we'll just end up like those other ones before us. And I don't know, it just really makes you think. It's a great little like it was an audiobook. I think it took me like 3 hours to listen to or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, a few points. Um, I remember this book when I was young. I really appreciate the archetypes, channelers, and the use of a gorilla as the channel for the message, because it's something that Western society, I won't say we because I don't feel a part of that, because I do have my own mythos and I do adhere to, adhere, maybe that isn't the right word, but I do like to use story and archetype, and I do feel connected with culture and reaching back into my own ancestral heritages and their own stories. And I do love the use of story. I mean, that's age old, is the use of story, and as philosophy and as lesson and parable and moral. And the sort of instruction manuals of life and living and loving and everything here and after in between. I like the use of the gorilla because it's sort of a symbolism of our primitive root selves that we can relate to from a lower self sort of standpoint to reach a higher. It's like it's more relatable, I think, to a person that's still in that sort of state of being, state of mind.
Yeah, because in there he talks about, like, he's like, oh, we don't want they never say his name, but the guy talking to the gorilla is like, yeah, like we don't want to live like lions or wombats anymore. And the gorilla's like, what's wrong with that? Like they don't take more than we need, and how, like, and they relate it to the birth of agriculture, because they're like, how that relate, because when that starts, once you start growing stuff and planning, trying to be in control of the food source, and that leads to like surplus, which leads to like hoarding, and like, this is mine, like this is not yours, and that leads to like trade, which leads to like money and mathematics, and then how that just keeps snowballing down that way. And it's even just in our lingo, like how, because like the whole idea of like conquering, or this is ours, like, because like even like when the early days when they did space travel, I got lemongrass in my teeth. There was they even say like, oh, we gotta conquer space. We gotta like conquer, just our march goes forward, and like we gotta like go to Mars, and how they related that to like when agriculturalists start. And apparently that's like the whole Cable and Ain story. Like one was kind of doing that. I don't know the full story, but it was in relation. They were relating that, but and how like
well,
people
if I'm
with
remembering
agriculture,
correctly,
they like,
they're the first two born sons of man after the first wipeout. After the first rewriting, and they were brothers, representative of a lot. Anyway.
oh,
you were saying.
yeah, and just how like what agriculture, how it's like almost like Christians when they go to like these these lever primitive people, and like they're like, oh, you guys need to start growing shit, like, so they're like, you gotta start farming, and how we do that like everywhere, like New Zealand, like they just like any new land is an opportunity to start farming, and then just keep spreading that mindset of you have to control your food, and which has its perks, but then like, but they're talking to hunter gatherer, they're doing like a little run through of talking to hunter gatherer person, and he's like, well, you got to have more food, and he's like, what are you gonna do if there's a, he's like, what are you gonna do if you're hungry, and he's like, then the gorilla Ishmael is playing the hunter guy, and he's like, well, we just go out and hunt some deer, and he's like, what if there's no deer or anything, and he's like, well, then we'll hunt for some rabbits, and he's like, if there's no rabbits, then we'll, basically, he's like, then even talking about just like not doing well, like as a people, then, well, it's just in the hands of stuff, but then the other guy just can't fathom it, and he's like, no, you need to like join, you kind of like essentially join this, and it's very proselytizing.
So that apex, instead of knowing that we're in a holistic world and that everything, and we're not above or below anything, that we all work in symbiosis with everything else. Everything is just as important as the other. Excuse me. Like the eradication of pests really is challenging for me. I like to work with nature instead of wanting to conquer. I think that ego, that survival mechanism within us is or not within us, but within that sort of societal mentality that, yeah, like you said, we're the apex in that framework, And that's just not how nature works. I
Like,
really like, it reminds me of Abraham Hicks, Esther Hicks, and the way that she's a channeler for similar message, and a lot of other channelers that channel through with guides and with our archangels. Ishmael, it harks back in my brain to Ishmael is the firstborn son of Abraham.
yeah, that's what I read.
Which was, he was like the holy grandfather of the Ishmaelites, and consequently, where we come from, being the sons of laughter, was half brother to Isaac, who was born of Abraham and Sarah. Which is funny enough, that's my biblical name. There's a lot of like full circle energy in that for me right now. Is what that's pulling at from within. Thank you for sharing the book with me.
Yeah, it was very. I don't know, like when you read comments on it, it's like, oh, this totally changed the way I perceive things, and like, yeah, because I feel like most Western people don't. You just assume that's just the way you think. The only way to think and way to be, and then how that like cuts off so much other stuff that we can and can't do.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely a needed source of wisdom.
Kind of like last episode, we were talking about like with psychic abilities, and how like if you
Mm-hmm.
if you don't think you can do it, then just you're not gonna. The door is closed. So
this is what I was talking about with psychic ability, is that it's treated as like a supernatural, paranormal type of thing, instead of it being very natural. It is just the senses that are honed and practiced, just our regular senses that we have the ability to hone and practice and to tap into. And if we were taught, just as like what Ishmael is trying to convey, if we were taught that these are natural occurrences outside of the paradigm of what we've been taught, or what others have been taught, because I don't relate to that sort of mentality at all. I've never thought of myself as greater than any other creature, not even the smallest of organisms. Everything is miraculous and beautiful, including compost. Can I read this poem real quick?
yeah,
From the book. It's quite gorgeous. I can give a little context here. So, the greatest philosopher Socrates, called planet Earth a gigantic organism, as I was just saying. A concept Michael Beck expands upon in hauntingly beautiful epic style. There is no pretentious prose in Beck's little opus. There is simply a humble recognition that a minuscule part does not command the organism, that no one born of woman is smart enough to redesign nature. This harsh assessment comes terribly close to saying that modern agriculture is really not worth saving.
Oh, what a perfect tie-in.
Right. So it really arcs back to what I've been rereading this book, because every spring I like to peruse through all of my books over again. It's kind of this cycle of re-education, every larger cycle for me in the seasons. So, and it's just so funny that we're really...
Sorry, and real quick, yeah, I'm sure by modern agriculture it means like industrial, like monocropping and heavy
Yes. So he really,
right,
he really brings a common man approach to even the Texas A&M University. He completely kind of overhauled the way that they teach, and the way that a lot of big industry in Texas thinks and acts and participates in agriculture here, speaking of agriculture. And he goes around to farms all throughout Texas and helps them unlearn and relearn, being in step with nature and just looking at things in a common sense approach. That's what I appreciate the most about the people that really resonate with me, that I feel have a common silver strand, kind of soul link with. Simple. And closest to nature, back to the basics. So in continuing this, there is an oft quoted poem that late William A. Albright liked to recite. Its sparkling lines explain the mindset of the modern agriculturalist and project the reason for being of a man like Malcolm. This poem, author unknown, encapsulates what is really the message of this book. Anonymous. It tells with penetrating insight. Really, the message of this book, it tells with penetrating insight how men first fertilize the soil, and then, here it is. At first, men try with magic charm to fertilize the earth, to keep their flocks and herds from harm, and bring new young to birth. Then to capricious gods they turn to save from fire or floods. Their smoking sacrifices burn on altars red with blood. Next bold philosopher and sage, a settled plan decree, and prove by thought or sacred page what nature ought to be. But nature smiles, a sphinx-like smile. Watching their little day, she waits in patience for a while, their plans to dissolve away. They come, those humbler men of heart, then they come, with no completed scheme, context to play a modest part, content to play a modest part, to test, observe, and dream, till out of chaos come in sight, clear fragments of a whole. Man, learning nature's ways aright, obeying, can control. The great design now glows afar, but yet its changing scenes reveal not what the pieces are, nor what the puzzle means. And nature smiles, still unconfessed, the secret thought she thinks. Inscrutable she guards, unguessed, the riddle of the Sphinx.
Very nice.
Thank you. It is not my own, but I resonate with.
Speaking on hunter-gatherer primitive type living, I saw this thing in you being on your Moonses about hunter-gatherer women. I don't know how they find this out, but they said they didn't generally start their periods until they were like 17 or 18, and how that has. What they were correlating that to was like body fat content and like just us being more, having more fat and just food available. So I guess that triggers your body to like, all right, we're ready to have a baby, because like if there's more scarcity in food and you're like, your body waits until it's like, more ready. But and they say, like female athletes, like they don't start their periods till way later because they're generally have less fat on them. But I just found that interesting because like how young girls can start it nowadays.
Right, I started, and this sort of runs in my family this way. I started when I was 10 years old. My youngest daughter started when she was 10 years old. My mother started when she was 10 years old.
Yeah, because I imagine if you're have more fat content, that your body thinks, all right, we have food for a baby, so it like kind of seems like it makes sense that it would like just trigger to like, all right, we're we're ready. Versus like the scarcity of food, like this is not a good time to be having a baby. Look how lean we are right now.
And in my family, we are curvy women with more hip and butts and kind of the typical hourglass shape. We have some meat, a little thick thighs, and boy, does that save lives. Speaking of Moonses, I just had one quote here. It's called Moon Moon by Anne Kent Rush. It's from my other book that I'm plugging today, another one called Soul Sisters, The 5 Sacred Qualities of a Woman's Soul by Pythia P.A. Delicious book. Oh, just chock full of so much wisdom. Every page has at least 3 or 4 quotes along the edges, along the margins. And it's the way, this is from The Feminine Face of Magic chapter. She is the egg and the seed of the world. She is darkness as well as light. Her cycles encompass all moods and all phases. She is queen of the bright night and of the darkness, guide to the lost traveler and pathway to the underworld. She brings creativity and visions. She also brings sleep, darkness, and death. She is the home of the souls of the unborn and of the dead waiting for rebirth. Oh, moon, moon.
Speaking more on blood, I remember listening to my notes about how I learned that actually I just forgot that cats in order for cats to be fertilized, the semen of the male cat has to be mixed with the blood of the female, which is why male cats have like barbed penises, so that I guess it just fucks them up inside, and
it's
then
so ritualistic.
and that's why you hear like when you hear cats mating like outside, they're like, it sounds like the female's screaming. She's like, and it's because there's like blood being drawn. So I thought that was fast. Just blood and semen. That's like I don't know why that's an evolutionary thing, but
the more I learned about cats throughout my life, and just being raised with so many cats, and being the firstborn daughter of 7 generations or more of firstborn daughters, at least that's the traceable of it. And then being our familiars, and realizing through stories like Constantine and what cats were used for in ancient practices and lore and mythos, them straddling the worlds, that they're able to be used
dimension hoppers,
right? But that you can use them as a catalyst for dimensional hopping yourself, and just the way that their cats are so incredibly interesting. I don't like living with cats, but I do have an immense respect for cats.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the litter box and just toxoplasmosis, but indoor outdoor cats is a little different. But
yeah, my cats always went outside. But
they I don't know. I can't remember exactly what that is, but it's something like in the cat that has some parasite in them, and then it goes through their pee. I mean, that's why they say pregnant women can't be change litter boxes, because there's something in there and it just affects you and the baby, and like it makes you like aggressive, and it does all these like judgment calls and something, because I think to reproduce there's something in the cat's belly that when it gets into rats or mice, like something happens to them, to their chemically in their brain, where they literally get like sexually attracted to the smell of cat pee. Yes. So then that's what it is. There's like a parasite in the mouse.
To the cats.
Yeah, so they go where the cats are, and then the cats eat it, and then that parasite is in the cat's stomach, and then that's where it like reproduces or something.
And then it births, right. And then it's able to produce inside the cat's digestive system, and then the whole cycle starts over again. So the mice end up actually sexually attracted to the cats,
or they get like excited by the cat pee.
Amorous. It makes them amorous. It's so fascinating. Whoa, I'm not sure why, but that reminded me of the process of cordyceps and the way that works. Just I think because the parasitic nature of that, parasites are fascinating, aren't they? In the way the mind control.
Yeah, just how it changes your behavior to reproduce.
Yeah.
I remember some fungus where I think it's crickets or grasshoppers or something that makes them like climb. Some of them like makes them drown, like they drown themselves to reproduce, and some like go to the top of a tree, and then this thing bursts out of its head and shoots pores out so it can like spread further out. And
right, that's how the cordyceps work as well. So
you're thinking worms, right?
It infects the worm, and then
I know, so like those mushrooms aren't too vegan.
Causes the worm to stop at a certain point in the soil, and then die, and then the spores are born it bursts out of, well, not die yet while it's living, it bursts out of the top of the worm's head so that it can breach this topsoil, and it uses the worm as its own fertilizer. So it takes over the mind of the worm, controls it, and then uses it.
Yeah, and it's just symbolic of what, like Candida or just stuff does to us, where like literally changes our behavior. Like I need to eat sugar right now because that feeds whatever's growing in you, and like
it makes you wonder how much of our behavior is controlled by parasitic entities.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that really harks back to demon possession and like the stories of like the OG stories of vampires and garlic and silver and all of these protections against parasitic and demonic possession and what that actually means.
I mean, the same thing as like when you see someone on meth or something, that's like a chemical demon in them. Like they just go crazy and stuff.
I have far too much experience with that.
Well, no, speaking on the cat pee before I forget, I remember hearing that why you can train cats in litter boxes and not dogs, which I found out you can do pigs use litter boxes too if you have a little potbelly pig, but it's because cats are very like territorial and they stay in an area, so they pee and poop in one area, but dogs, they naturally are nomadic, they just run, so it doesn't matter where they shit because they're up like I'm going to be gone in 10 minutes. So.
And I relate more to dogs. I was actually also born in the year of the dog, and I have a lot of kind of traits of a dog more than I would cats.
Pee all over the place, I'll tell you that.
I really love to travel, and I'm more nomadic, and yeah, I pee all over the place.
I mean, so do I. I try to pee outside as much as I can.
Yeah, I really want to go back to a composting toilet. I'm really, I'm not enjoying the indoor plumbing, especially with I enjoyed learning all about plumbing. That was really fun, and it was really fun I installed my first toilet here, which was super cool, but I really want to get back to humanure. Speaking of compost, back to the compost. It always comes back to the compost. But yeah, I'd really like a composting toilet again. That's challenging with children, and especially teenage daughters. And I was going to speak to that. There's a lot of different ways to use materials that don't fill landfills and aren't filled with plastics and chemicals for yourself, even if you're not comfortable with using rags or flea bleeding all the time, which, we live in a modern age. I know that's really inconvenient and not possible for a lot of folks. So I wanted to plug just something that we use whenever times get busy or we need simplification, or the girls, they still roam in and out of the modern world all the time as well. And it's this you can even find the brand at Walmart. It's called L, and they've just formulated. They have a new look and new material. It's 100% pure cotton top layer, 100% plant-based absorbent core. And then, of course, they don't have any dyes, fragrances, or synthetic pesticides. And I believe they're working towards becoming organic. And this is the second time I've seen this little insert, this card in their packaging, where they've improved upon themselves in the last couple of years. So I think I like a company that's constantly evaluating themselves and just re-establishing their product. I don't know if that's the right word right now, but I just really dig evolving products and evolving companies that are always looking at how they can improve upon themselves to be more economical and environmental and
Yeah, let's say I think all companies do that, but it's in terms of how can we make more profit this quarter? It's like we need more, but yeah, it's different for not that many care about sustainability aspects.
Well, they also donate back to programs helping other women around the world be able to have access to their own menstrual products, because that's a big issue, especially in countries where women don't have much of a voice in this way and are demonized for having a menstrual cycle. For
Talk.
just being women, for just being absolutely natural. I mean, more than half the world has sheds their uterine lining once a month, that are inside the cycles of still within reproduction range, and it should be something that is common education, especially among men who are raised by women and then live by women with women for most of their lives if they choose to be in relationship. And I don't know, I think I'm thinking of creating something out of this, because it's such a topic that I like to speak to, and I like to engage in. I like to engage in communication this way and make it less taboo with people, because so many women, it's even so taboo to themselves, and amidst them, their own families, their own mothers won't even speak to it with them. So then they're left thinking one day, whenever they just start bleeding all over themselves, that they're dying and they don't know what to do, and they're stopping it with every sort of material that they can find, and then just have to figure it out for themselves. They have to fend for themselves. I'm so grateful for my mother growing up that we started speaking on reproduction and things at a very young age. So I was very aware of my menstrual cycle. So I'm grateful for her for that. And I've been the same way with my girls and any woman within earshot. But I do tend to make people quite uncomfortable with it, because it's such a taboo.
Yeah. What do you mean start something? Like, what do you, like a
I don't
product or
know.
like a
Yeah.
forum type of?
There's something brewing there. So we'll circle back to that once it's been established and created. But yeah, I feel there's purpose, and there's a need. Obviously, there's still a need. I know there's a lot of people that are engaged in this process already, but I feel like I want to be another voice and source of light.
Well, I've always heard women talk about those moon cups, and I've heard so many people dog on those and just say how they hurt, or they just leak. They don't really do anything. They're like, shit still gets falls out.
They keep evolving too, and every
Is that what they're
woman
called,
has
moon cups?
Yeah, there's all sorts of names for them, but it's a menstrual cup, and I've tried several different brands, and my cervix actually leans to the left, so it doesn't always work for me. It'll leak, or it'll slip, or it doesn't fit correctly. If there's different sizes for different cups, depending on whether you've had children or not. I've had 2 vaginal births, so my needs are different. But it's an evolving process, which I love. I really dig that there's these underwears out there, which of course, there's just so many different ways that companies are trying to create solutions for something so common. I just really appreciate the evolution of it. I did see that there's a big what do you call it? Anyway, there's a big problem with the underwear that's coming out now, that they've been finding some really toxic chemicals within the underwear that are causing problems for women. And I think there's a big lawsuit right now in some of these menstrual underwear.
Oh, specifically menstrual underwear?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But hey, it's an evolving process, like everything. It's evolving. Just like me. I'm a lot more calm and centered than I was even a couple of weeks ago. The winter, I'm also a winter baby, so the winter has, especially during and after freezes, or during freezes, has a way of really triggering shadow work for me. And the ice is a perfect mirror for that which needs to be worked through in my environment, and outer and inner. So the last couple of weeks have been really illuminating. What a beautiful process this last month has been. Especially podcasting and having to look at myself in the very real mirror of video and
Right.
recording. Yeah, learning a lot about myself and us and everything.
Well, I have this in my notes about just another thing about women that I know some study about. It's called like the sweaty T-shirt experiment, but they were saying like women have been found to have 7 times better smell than men, and so they did this experiment where they did like these factors based on like immune response genes and how. So basically, like they'd have all these like men wear shirts for like 2 days, and they put them in a plastic bag, and the women would like take big whiffs of them, and then like based on these studies, like I think they said like 80% of the time, like say if they did like had like 5 things that they were measuring, and say if like a woman was deficient in number 3, and if a man had like was high in number 3, like they would be like attracted to that. They're like, yeah, I like this one. This one smells good. And then like saying, like, and short number 4, like, and this guy's got a lot of 4, then they were attracted to that one. But then they were talking about how women on birth control, because that one, the previous had 80%, but the women on birth control, when they did it, it like dropped down to 20%, and how they were just how that affected their smell, and then how women on birth control and how that could possibly correlate to like birth defects or just birth mishaps of stuff, not like defects, but just things that don't align because that natural pheromone smell thing is blocked from birth control, and how like I don't know, I just found that was super interesting that there's how that blocks it, and then because you wouldn't naturally mate with that person if you weren't on that, and I've heard people talk about birth control and how much their sex drive just drops when they're on it, and
yes, and you gain weight, changes your biochemistry, your brain, everything. It really fucks with nature. And I really don't appreciate it. I feel very passionately about birth control.
That's why
I feel like there's a lot of other ways to manage yourself outside of pharmaceutical therapy. Well, including, like, for instance, this tea. It's a reproductive tea blend that I've created specifically for myself because I found that it works for me, and just through herbal education. But it's raspberry leaf, rose hips, hibiscus, and cacao. And
it's for birth control?
Well, it's for a healthy reproductive system, but some people do use different herbals for birth control, and that still have their own side effects and that everything that can come with that. I'm not saying herbalism is perfect, but it's far better than the side effects and also the detrimental effects also to the environment and the waters that birth control has. I remember I had an IUD. I actually became pregnant on an IUD because it got pulled out at some point. But the progesterone, I had never been on birth control before, but this was after my first child, and I wasn't allowed to get my tubes tied by law. I had moved back to Texas from Colorado, and no one would tie my tubes, even though I didn't want another child. But my second child, she is a gift, and that is why her name is the gift of God and source, what have you. But that progesterone, I found out very quickly that this is why I had some PMDD type symptoms with my cycle in my 3rd week of my cycle, because I was incredibly sensitive to progesterone, and some women just are. I gained 15 pounds in a month. I would hold excess of 20 pounds of water during that time of my cycle. I was an emotional, absolute, beautiful mess. And usually where I would have a wonderful sense of smell, and I'd be able to sniff out, dangerous men and dangerous situations. Pertaining to what you were speaking to, I definitely felt and recognized a difference. Being so attuned to myself in like what I was able to smell or what I was able to sniff out, so to speak, as a person. It really wrecked me.
I'm glad you brought it back to that, because I was gonna say that's like when people wear like heavy cologne or perfumes, I'm like, man, it just triggers my like throat and systems, but
Yeah.
I'm just like, man, what are you hiding? Like, just because it's just very like, especially all these like chemical deodorants, and it's just like everything to do everything you can to prevent as your natural smell, and it's just like in my head, I'm always just like, yeah, what are you hiding under that smell blanket you're wearing?
Mm-hmm. Also, I understand, and in understanding that a lot of chemicals, a lot of man-made chemicals and synthetics are endocrine disruptors, and this is why a lot of people have hormonal issues and diabetes and everything else and growth issues. Also responsible for a lot of mental disorders. Argue with me about it, but I would venture to say a lot of autism and autistic traits and mental disturbances and behavioral disturbances in children are because of fabric softeners and aerosols and synthetic fragrances are really responsible for so much inside the home. I mean,
that stuff passes the blood-brain membrane, and like they find that in like babies, like or in the womb, like they find like plastics and carcinogens in there, like just because like that's the mom's around it, and then it just gets into them.
In testing umbilical cord tissue and fluids, they found a plethora. I believe it's upwards of 300 plus known carcinogenic chemicals from a person's typical environment. That many of them could be avoided just through natural living. And I would much rather smell a natural human than unnatural chemicals. I can't stand the smell of fabric softener or laundry detergent,
sweaty t-shirt thing,
or cologne on men. It turns me off a lot. You're saying what?
Yeah, me too.
Sweaty t-shirt, what?
And the sweaty t-shirt thing, they're also talking about how, like if you do have a good match, and basically if you like sleep in a stranger's bed, and like how it can like induce stress because like the systems don't line up, and you're like, oh, this isn't like a, compatible, and then I don't know, I found, and so they're talking, they say like, it's a classic thing, like, if your loved one's absent, if you sleep with something of theirs, and you find comfort in that, but that's like it's like a chemical thing, like. And so, if you're in someone else's bed, it's like you can be, be like subconsciously stressed because you're like, man, this isn't right.
I love the way you smell, your natural scent. Like I will quite literally just stick my nose in his armpit.
I'm like, whoa.
I love it.
But I mean, I don't think I have like a crazy funk, but. Yeah, I remember when I do jiu-jitsu, like that'd be because you're like right on top of people, you're like sweat and like and just as like a racial thing, and you can just smell people's diets. I'm like, oh, this guy definitely eats a lot of Indian food, or this is like, you just, it's interesting just how different people smell. It's like fascinating.
I love that smell, like the smell of spices through someone's skin. It's very interesting how we could be reprogrammed as humans. I really appreciate the way that I've programmed myself. The things that I've unlearned and relearned and reprogrammed for myself.
Yeah, we're very susceptible to it. That was another thing I was going to bring up was Edward Bernays and how he was like, he was Freud's nephew, and how he was like the master of like programming us, and like some of the examples, like he worked with like the pork industry, and he just created the term like breakfast meats and to sell bacon, like, oh, this is what you eat for breakfast. And
this is why pork belly was on the stock market also as a commodity. I mean, he's responsible for a lot of marketing and the principles of marketing and advertising as they are now. He's like the granddaddy of that. That's a prime example of using I'm not a big fan of psychology as it is. I mean, on a whole, I mean, a lot of it is useful, but I do feel that that's a prime example of, using your powers, definitely using your powers for good and or evil, if we're to divide that into just the polarities.
Well, I mean, objectively, yeah, he's like smart because yeah, he's just getting paid. These people are like, hey, how can we sell this? And like another one was like cigarettes to women because they'd call them like freedom torches or to make them feel like they're part of the war effort and or they're like whole Virginia Slims because it's like feminine cigarette and
But they also
one
use
was like
doctors in white
Dixie
coats.
cups was the Dixie brand hired him to sell little disposable cups. So he came up with, oh, it's more hygienic to use just these plastic disposable cups because reusable glasses, like there's bacteria in there, so don't use that. Like so
Yes.
he's a big problem of the whole disposal mindset of stuff.
It's really interesting.
That took us down a long road.
We're still on that long road. But like I always say, where my focus goes, energy grows. So I like to stay on the focus of possibility outside of programmability. how we're so, or human beings are so trusting, especially in a system that is predicated upon a kind of fatherly program, for lack of a better term.
Well, yeah, and like harping
to
back.
look to our fathers. I mean, we say our forefathers, right? We'd say to look to our fathers for guidance, and so it's not the fault of the people or the person. It's just a bunch of mind traps.
Well, yeah, it's like what Ishmael was talking about. It's like the culture which enacts the story, and our stories, yeah, it's just like we have domain, we can create whatever we want, but harping back to that tribal aspect of like men or just you're talking about like to the father aspect and like because like when all these in programming because like if when you live like in a what is that I can't remember that guy's name but it's like when that number where it's like you can keep like 150 people in your head and that's who you in like faces how you can remember and so like when you're in like a small setting like that you're less inclined to like screw somebody over because you're going to be eating dinner with that person that night or you're going to see them. But if you're like far away, isolated in your like castle, like yeah, that's just a statistic. That's just a name on a piece of paper. So like, who cares if I screw them over?
Right, but we're not really in that sort of tribal, communal setting anymore. It's societal now.
Yeah,
so,
definitely not.
There's a lot more people, especially within the hives of cities and whatnot. I don't really like to dive into that very often. I really want and crave and would like to, with the rest of my fellow fringe family and friends, to create our own community, if not town. Some people are creating their own towns with their own sort of with their own ideals of systems, and that's a dream of mine, is to
let's do the Osho method.
Create a community of people that all have their own abilities and education and ways and means and ideas and goals and gifts and skills.
So how do you decide who gets in or out though, or in at least?
What's I think naturally
who's governing this?
When we're all in our own natural vibration and we're vibrating out, we're all on this frequency that's we can tune into, and we're all basically on the same radio dial. We all gravitate towards each other naturally, like you and I did, like we and Francis did, Pearl, Yeshua, Juno, Jordy, as we've been here and living intentionally, since starting this homestead and being on that wavelength, we all naturally start to vibrate towards one another. I mean, you attract what you are. So the more that you become, the more that comes to you in the same fashion. The more you attract your own mirrors. And so seeking and pursuing through practice daily is going to bring us to that vision. If that's the evolving vision, then I just trust that that's what's happening. It's already unfurling and unfolding. And every time I see an omen, a sign, the Hewlin and Mulin, so to speak, of the breadcrumbs, I just having the eyes to see that, okay, I'm on the right path. Okay, this is in alignment. I'm attuned to this, and it's attuned to me. And eventually, if that's what we truly want, we'll get there. So no foresies, but just walk in the path.
Well, yeah, and just for like on that kind of note, just like for like single people, if you're trying to meet someone, like like these fucking apps and stuff, like that's not. I don't know. It's not a. I don't feel like a great way to meet people.
We met on an app.
If you like do say you're interested in an activity or some a hobby, and you're on this frequency of it, and by doing that you meet other people in that hobby, like they're already on the same like wavelength as you. Yes. Partially, so that's like a great way to start versus just swiping. I mean, we didn't meet on a dating app though. It wasn't like
but we did meet on Instagram.
We weren't looking for like it's not like this contrived thing.
No, and what's beautiful is that we met. Oh, it's a warning call, or is that a laying call? Oh, it's laying. Okay. Chickens are making noise. We met over an Alex Gray post of mine. My post initially started as my page started as a fitness and nutrition and wellness page, just business page. And then eventually it turned into personal journaling. And one of my great bravest feats was to post this out of context and character for my page, an Alex Gray painting. And that's how B found me. And then the rest was history. We became sort of pen pals, so to speak, in the digital age, and followed each other's journeys and had deep existential conversations, and then finally met up for a hike 2 years later. Spent 9-10 hours on a hike in the woods and swam with Cottonmouth and did a rain dance to evoke a storm, and made love on a rock in a creek, trespassing on someone's property.
That's right.
It was gorgeous. It was gorgeous. And then he caught a balloon for me. He went and, when we were leaving, went and ran and caught this heart balloon for me.
Wasn't it in your trunk? I thought
it was in my trunk. I don't even know why.
The wind just blew it out, and I just sprinted after it. And I was like, "How symbolic!" Yeah. I'm like sprinting after this lady's heart, and I was like,
"Exactly."
It's very symbolic.
There is a lot of symbolism in that whole journey. There was a lot of resistance in the beginning from the outside world, from every angle. A lot of energies trying to keep us separate and apart from the power of our union. It was too powerful, my love. But here we are. Here we are walking this journey together still, 6 years later. Now just still fulfilling dreams and goals and aspirations together. Working through the kinks. And so thank you for loving me. Happy birthday to me.
Yes, yeah. I feel weird even because we never really like celebrate birthdays, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm like, I feel there's still like a societal obligation. I'm like, oh, I guess I need to do something because it's her birthday, because to make sure she knows I care. But I'm like, I don't know. I get torn on. I'm like, should I even do anything? Because I'm like, I don't like, I never even tell people it's my birthday. Like it passed and
Yeah.
like at my work. I don't know. I just
I
don't even like it. But
I usually don't, but I really wanted to shout out again to my sister Frances, who dedicated, whom is also starting her own podcast. She's on Wildflower on Tour, and the podcast is Harmony of Stories, which I really loved that title that she channeled down with her guides. But she dedicated a reel to me, and she told the story, our origin story, and an ode of her love to me.
with the
It's
compost
gonna
story,
make me cry. Yeah, the compost story.
it's a
But
good way to circle back.
circle back to the compost. We're always in attunement together, all of us, in some way. And whenever we come back together in conversation, we're like, I'm in this stage and phase, and just re-education or self-education also. But there was this, we used to sing songs together, especially revolutionary songs at the beginning of 2020, because that was our way of spreading love light through the chaos and frustration and all of the negative emotion we wanted to transmute. And so we used to sing songs by like Rising Appalachia, Medicine Woman, and and Jewel. So she dedicated the song that meant a lot to us when we were teenagers. I used to sit in my bedroom. It's called Hands by Jewel, and she sang that to me. She played the guitar, and she sang the song to me for my birthday. And it was just my Earth Day. And just the... It was just the most gorgeous of gifts, and every time this sisterly love that we share together really breaks my heart open. My once frozen heart in this way within feminine relationships in my life, which I feel is a cultural problem. And there's another podcast that really speaks to this a lot, which I really appreciate. Her name is Becca Piastrelli, and she has the Belonging podcast. Just a plug and a shout out to her because I really appreciate the good works that she's doing. And also to Amber Magnolia Hill, who heads up Medicine Stories. Amber is actually the catalyst for me finding Becca Piastrelli, but she talks about a lot about community and the way of culture, and how sisterhood we've really lost our way in sisterhood, and how there's a toxic culture surrounding that, and how to come back into sisterhood. Speaking back to the Soul Sisters book. So I would just really appreciate that feminine connection, especially having an estranged and broken connection with my birth mother, and having to come back to myself, rebirth myself into mothering myself in the ways that I always wanted and needed from her. And thusly, it brought me my soul sister, and my bestest female friend in the entire universe. Oh, I'm just greatly appreciative. I think it's just a day to be able to, we don't follow, Western celebration or Western culture as far as holidays, Western holidays, and in fact, very anti. But I appreciate the dedication to people, and having a day to mark the incarnation of the human that I appreciate here, that walks upon the earth.
You would think a birthday would be about the mom. Like, oh, congrats, you gave birth, versus like, me, it's my day. Like, this is my birthday. And like, or like when audacity of people when they're like, "You're ruining my birthday," and you're like, "Oh my god,
I
dude,
do
it's
feel
just a
there's a
day." Do
lot
you know
of
how many
ego
people?
in
Do you
it.
know how many people share the same birthday as you? I'm like,
Yeah, I had a friend. I couldn't make it to their birthday party once, and their now husband happened to propose on their birthday, and they didn't speak to me for 3 months because they were mad at me because I couldn't make it to their birthday party because I was having to save teenagers from themselves. One shot themselves in the stomach, not my own teenagers, by the way, and the other ended up going to jail. And so on that same evening, but it's just interesting how birthdays can really, it's kind of like bridezillas. I don't know, these marked occasions that have so much pressure and so much like ego-based mentality in them.
pressure and contrivity. I hate contrivity. Like, oh, here's the
Yeah.
part, here's the cake, countdown. We sing this song, and it's just like
Mm.
everything. Happy birthday.
Well, I love the celebration of people, and Francis really brought me back to the celebration of that. Recently, my little niecey, it was 6 years, her sixth birthday, which marked a very important occasion for my sister, and because my sister had a very difficult childbirth with her second child, I had very difficult, challenging childbirth with my first, and so we really relate to each other on that. And she died that day. She survived, and she was reborn to herself. So it was also, in essence, a 6-year cycle is very important to us in the moment. So I celebrated both of them. That was just last month. And I celebrated both of them that day. It was both of their Earth days to me. And so I wanted to make sure that my sister got the acknowledgement and to be held in that the way that she needed to be, both of them. So I don't know, she's reignited the importance of that for me. I appreciate that.
Well, I look like an asshole now. But we're well over time. But I wanna start trying to do this segment of just like word of the week, like, but in terms of like etymology, like and I just came across this story about the origin of the word assassin, which is kind of a big direct derailing, but just the because it comes from the word there was like, hang on, there was a. It says that 800 years ago, there was like this Indian general who like lived in the mountains, and his name was like Old Man in the Mountains. And they'd have all these like crazy soldiers that would like capture and kill like Christian crusaders who were on their way to the Holy Land. And then but to get soldiers, he had to like what he did was they'd make hash, which is which comes from like assassin is like hash as Hashasin, which is assassin, which means like hash eaters. But the story is he would drug like like teenagers, and like just hash them and just enough till they pass out. Like you get kids from the street and they'd pass out because they're so high, like just high out of their minds. And then he'd bring them back to his palace, and there'd be like women and food and all kind like gold and stuff. And he and the kids are like wake up and they're like, where am I? And then he'd tell them like, oh, you died, like you're in heaven now. So like, have all the food and women you want, and then so after a while, like then after once they get the gist of it, then he'd tell them like, hey, I need you to go back to Earth so you can, and I need you to kill some people for me. And he's like, and don't worry if you get killed because you're gonna die. You're gonna come right back here. And then so he'd he'd get them all hashed out again out of their mind. They'd pass out. They'd wake up and they'd take their bodies and put them in the streets. And then they'd wake up on this mission like, oh, we got to kill these people. And then
that still happens now. That reminds me of so many.
Assassin comes from.
Thank you for that etymology. It just reminds me so much of so many street kids stories throughout the decades and ages, especially whenever I was rambling Rose on the road as a teenager.
It's some Operation.
Yeah, it reminds
me
like
Manson type shit,
right? I was about to say Charlie Manson and the all of those programs. I really don't want to bring attention to or light to because there's enough people who do that. But yeah, that's an age-old story, isn't it? That's such an age-old.
It's just interesting because you think assassin is just like the term. You think it's just like a hired gun, but you're like, oh, it's
Mm.
like it's like a weed reference and like.
Yeah, I never thought about the etymology of assassin. Thank you. Yeah, that's far too familiar. That's such a man that happens so often, especially with women. I really appreciate the segue. Thank you.
It's just I'm
I
trying to
think
do
that's
like
what's brilliant about
segments.
right. I think that's what's brilliant about us and what we're creating here is because I come with the feminine and you come with the masculine. I mean, and vice well, and I'm also
Name of the show.
seated in my masculine, but I'm very much rooted in my femininity right now, being in my second day, which is my heaviest flow,
Dude, that just
and
reminded
just being so deeply connected in my root at the moment. So thanks for bringing the masculine, baby. I need a pee break.
that just reminded me. We'll end on this. That reminded me of I was looking up the origins of the bird and the bees, like where that comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a couple like poems and like some stories, but one was talking about this song. What is the name of the song? I can't remember the name. Like it was like they something why they fall in love or something, or why they love or something.
Why do? Oh. Yes, of
But something
course.
I'll put it right here. But one of one of the lyrics is talking about like falling in love, and it's like the birds do it and the bees do it, and it goes the chinks do it and the Japs do it, and I was like, what? That's in the original song. I tried
Let's
to.
do it. Let's fall in
Yeah, it's something
love.
like that. I couldn't find the original, but it said, but in the original
Right.
recording, it says, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, what? That's in the original song, but I
Yeah.
never got why Jap is an offensive term. It's like short for Japanese. I'm like, it's like Jew isn't offensive, but Jap
Right.
is. But
It's so funny that you say that because I was listening
I'm Asian,
to
folks. Don't worry.
I was listening I was listening to a fellow channeler the other day, and there was a verbal flub that happened. She was giving a reading about the future of the Chinese, and she said a chink in the armor, and I just thought that it was just so
That's
kind of
definitely
funny.
purposeful.
It was so funny to me. No, it was definitely subconscious, but like a chink in the chain. But it was just
Yeah, I was telling you about that one comic,
very
Nathan.
interesting.
He's got this joke about that, like, that's kind of the punchline is a chink in the armor. And I remember he came up and asked me, he's like, hey man, is that offensive to say that? Is like, what's your take on that? And I was like, well, I personally, as a comic, I'm like, dude, that's not offensive to me, but most Asians are pretty conservative with that kind of thing. But it's like, I was
Mm,
telling him like, it's up to you to like, if it's the worth, like, is it worth the risk, the
right.
risk reward of that, like, just for,
I
you
like that
know,
he's asking you personally instead of just assuming that that is, culturally inappropriate or
right.
ethically inappropriate. I would like to just take a break because there's more that I like to speak of, and we can,
Well, we're like an hour 20 right now.
yeah, so we can put on weren't we speaking of longer conversations and putting up the second hour on a Patreon anyway?
I mean, we can, but we're not really
If you
like
guys are
ready for that.
interested.
But I'd rather save so we can have like more like
Oh,
weekly
I
stuff.
had
But
more things I wanted to speak to, but okay.
I mean, can I not wait till next week or?
I just won't even be in the same place next week. Yeah,
Okay.
it's hard for me to save things, especially being so incredibly present now in life, to hark back or to save things for future because I'll be in a very presently different place next Monday. Very interesting the way that that's been working, especially with the speed of life now. I know a lot of people I've been speaking with have been feeling this pretty profoundly, the way that life is speeding up. And we're trying to, or we're creating the energetic storage and capacity to be able to keep up with that. And I'm loving it. It's really nice. Anyway, break time. And we're back. I was speaking to, I had more that I wanted to share, kind of on the subject of birds.
I like birds.
You like birds, George? I like birds too. Well, speaking of which, my name meaning hummingbird, there's this excerpt from yet another book called Jaguar Woman and the Wisdom of the Butterfly Tree by Lynn Andrews. It's from the 70s. She's a wild storyteller. I really appreciate her poetic and just her wildish nature. But there's this poem, and Jaguar woman's voice became delicate and took on a warm, seductive tone. Her silhouette swayed in tempo to the music. I could see the other women in fingers of yellow moonlight. They were kneeling, their bodies heavy, like waves, rolling voluptuously. Each of them moved supplely, just as though they were very graceful and very young women. See the beauty before you. See the beauty before you. I am the hummingbird woman. Ho! I lead you to food. Ho! The eagle lord waits in the trees. He sees your skeleton. He sees your blood burn. See the beauty before you. Burn. See the beauty before you. Burn. I want your legs. I want your beautiful knees. Hummingbird woman prays. I want your arms. I want your toes and fingers. Praise. All power within us now. All power within us now.
That was nice. All I could think of was that guy who came up to me in Austin who's like this demon dude that came up to us and he was like, I just want to take your eyeballs out and put them in my pocket so I can eat them later.
Yeah, that was one of those people
Because he
in the beginning of our
admired my
relationship.
beauty. He wanted to take me
Yes.
behind the waterfalls, if you know what I mean.
He came around the corner and was slithering along, stalking like a predator, like a animalistic creature, and moving. And I felt such a demon-like quality to him. And we were in psychedelic ceremony, sitting together in a waterfall in the river down in Austin at what are the falls? Cumberland Falls or
Turner.
Turner?
I think.
No, Turner Falls is in Oklahoma.
Oh.
Anyway, McKinney Falls, and he inserted himself into our sphere.
The first thing this dude said to me was, "Hey, there's a spider on your back," and like, and I didn't freak out. I was like, "Oh, cool!" And like I was, kind of like, "Can you get it off?" I didn't freak out, and I could tell he was like, he wanted me to freak out. He wanted me to. You could just some manipulation, and I remember, and then there wasn't even a fucking spider on my back. And I remember I was like, can one of you help me? And I was like,
he was gauging your reaction, and he didn't like me at all because obviously, through my behavior, I could see right through him. And
then he OD'd you on some kratom.
he gave me a peace offering, and I was tired and in a very peaceful, centered place. So I wasn't using my intuition at this moment, obviously, or I wouldn't have taken the kratom, but it was the first time I had ever done kratom. And since then I've learned I am very sensitive to kratom. I'm a person who doesn't do well on it.
I didn't feel anything.
With the medicine. And some medicines your body just doesn't do well with. Well, this is one of them for me. And yeah, he quite literally tried to kill me. That was the whole experience. I was just speaking to about the energies that be and people that were in our lives, mainly your life at the time, that were trying to keep us separate and trying to separate us. It was very interesting, and that's where we really realized and started seeing our angels also, our methy angels, as we call them. Our first angel named Eddie. He's a homeless man in downtown that was protecting us from other energies that were trying to attach to us while we were kind of in a weakened, or I was in a very weakened state and vulnerable, and B was trying to protect me. So that
I was just trying to keep you alive. I wasn't protecting, but
well, Eddie was protecting us, and that was beautiful. And you did keep me alive. We kept me alive. Oh well. What an experience that was. I wonder if he would have eaten your eyeballs with anything.
Don't even try it, dude. I wasn't gonna let him.
Strange entities. You know, they try it. They
I'm
try
terrible.
it.
I'm terrible about gay dudes hitting on me, but I
Mm,
definitely would.
yeah.
I'm definitely uh, have enough agency over my own consciousness to know I'm like when I drink, I'm like, okay, this is getting too much. I know when to stop. Especially I got to drive later, so I'm like, this is where I need to stop. I'm not trying to go past this line, and then especially with like
Mm-hmm.
other things. I don't know. I'm very
I really do
I know how
appreciate that
to
in you.
I know how to like pump the brakes on certain things,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah. I do appreciate your
what is that word? It's my ruling temperance. But I
temperance.
think temperance doesn't that mean like sobriety though? Like, or
No,
is it
it's
just?
just moderation.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm
Temperance.
good at moderating. Yeah.
Yeah. My Sagittarius. My other reference to birds and also to winter. I wanted to bring in winter tales since we're in the tail end of winter. And it's February. And this is a chapter from chapter 3. This is another gorgeous book. Actually, B bought this for me.
You
It's
have to
by
hold them up. I'll put it up here.
okay, Annie Dillard, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, a mystical excursion into the natural world.
Yeah, I've kind of heard
This
it's
is a
like
treasure of
I kind of heard
mine.
it's like related. It's like the female version of Walden, essentially.
Yes, and Walden Thoreau is I actually had a quote from Thoreau that I wanted to read today also. That's so funny. Uh, but the female version of Walden, of course, I was completely infatuated. And see, this is something romantic that you bought for me. And it being February, and my birthday. You see, it comes full circle. Buy me a book or a plant and and I'm a puddle. um, or seeds. So this chapter's chapter 3. It's called Winter. It's just a historical tidbit as well. In the 1st of February, and everyone is talking about starlings. Starlings came to this country on a passenger liner from Europe. 100 of them were deliberately released in Central Park, and from those 100 descended all of our countless millions of starlings today. According to Edwin Way Teale, their coming was the result of one man's fancy. That man was Eugene Sheffield, a wealthy New York drug manufacturer. His curious hobby was the introduction into America of all the birds mentioned in William Shakespeare. The birds adapted to their new country splendidly. When John Cowper Powys lived in the United States, he wrote about chickadees stealing crumbs from his favorite flock of starlings. Around here, they're not so popular. Instead of quietly curling for sleep one by one, here and there in dense shrubbery, as many birds do, starlings roost all together in vast hordes and droves. They have favorite roosting sites to which they return winter after winter. Apparently, Southwest Virginia is their idea of Miami Beach. In Waynesboro, where the starlings roost in the woods near the Coiner Springs area, residents can't go outside for any length of time or even just to hang laundry because of the stink. Will knock you over, the droppings and the lice. Starlings are notoriously difficult to control. The story is told of a man who was bothered by starlings roosting in a large sycamore near his house. He said he tried everything to get rid of them and finally took a shotgun to 3 of them and killed them. He asked if that discouraged the birds. He reflected a minute, leaned forward and said confidently, "Those 3 it did." So it's interesting that I read this as I had just discovered a new group, which isn't a new group, but it was a new group to me, which was comprised of all of these ladies that I listen to individually, but they're called Starling Arrow. And the group that I listen to the most is Rising Appalachia, which I mentioned earlier that my sister and I used to sing. And they're from the Appalachian Mountains, in Virginia and such. So it's just full circle. And I never knew the history of starlings here in the United States, but they come down here too. They come and they pick at the chickens' food a lot in the wintertime.
Are those the ones with like the yellow bellies?
No, they're the black and white guys.
Oh,
Yeah.
I just always remember that one little. Remember that? I don't know what kind of bird it is. I'll try to put it up here, but it was like kind of grayish, silvery, and then it had like yellow.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we found a dead one on its back, and he had like a tiny little bird boner. It was like it was like in rigor mortis, but
I used to know. That was quite a large. It was quite large for a bird.
nah, dude,
I
it was like a
remember being
little,
surprised
looked like
for
a
his
little,
body.
looked like a little stick. But
For his body, I was surprised.
speaking of penises, I was just reading on that prehistory of sex book about, and I read it at Sex at Dawn too, but it was talking about in terms of like other apes and mammals, like how mainly apes, but humans have gigantic penises compared to like gorillas and chimps and bonobos. Like theirs are like
Mm-hmm.
centimeters long, and I'm trying to remember how what the why that happened and what the preferences was, but I don't know. I find that because you think a giant gorilla, you think of like the big
Mm-hmm.
alpha, but I think because in that type of situation when there's like an alpha, like one guy getting all the females, like there's not really I guess there's not a need to like have a bigger penis because I think they try to correlate that to like shooting semen in there and stuff, but monogamous, not monogamous, like bonobo type situations, and like I think they have bigger penises than chimps. I don't. I could be talking out of my ass. I'm talking about 8 penises, but I just remember hearing that and I was like, oh, fascinating.
I really enjoy bonobo lifestyle because it's still a monarchy. I dig that.
Yeah, and they
The
use
women choose. The women choose, and the women are very sexually open and self-ruling and educated. I like it. I dig it.
well, yeah, and like
I
because
wish we were more like
chimps
that
use
as a culture.
chimps use power for sex, and bonobos use sex for power. Because
Mm-hmm.
like a chimp, they try to get power so they can have one guy get all the ladies, but bonobos with a bunch of females, there's like, hey, they're like no problem having sex, and everyone's chill and calmed out, like, and then one guy starts misbehaving, you kind of like kick that guy out, and then so it's a totally interesting and because then and people try to talk about correlate the are we more like bonobos or more like chimps because people talk like non-monogamy being a bigger thing and how that's very rare for animals to be monogamous. There's only like a few that do it. I think a couple birds do it. I think maybe a couple monkeys, I think, or something like but it's very rare.
Now you're reminding me of the song again. Da, 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 da. Let's do it. Let's fall in love. Well, excuse me. Thank you for bringing that. The sexual nature of the animal kingdom could really teach us a lot about our own sexuality, now couldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Instead of relying on institutional religious texts for our sexual morality.
Ooh. I don't even know where to begin with that, but I have a lot that I'd like to say. I was actually looking for my little notepad over here. Just one moment.
You said you had a bunch of other stuff you wanted to bring up. I guess this second half we can put on Patreon. It'll just be a bonus or paid for bonus type.
Okay. What was it surrounding the hour that's so important that way?
Just
this being an hour long.
Just consistent because the last one was like 50 minutes. Just somewhat consistency. If one's like 50 minutes, one's like 2 hours. Just listener retention it's hard to get people to stay that long, but.
Yeah, I understand.
But so might as
Maybe
well.
we could do a 2-part segment.
Yeah, might as well try to use this for just to put something on Patreon. But
if it ends up being interesting enough. I mean, I don't mind also just editing the quiet parts out of this. I know I've been very slow and low and slow this episode, so.
Not really. You've been talking most of the time, I feel.
Oh, okay. That quote from Thoreau that I was speaking to was my favorite quote. To affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of arts. That's what that reminded me of. Whenever you said that this was the female Walden.
Mm.
Oh, the little one is reading Walden right now. She's actually really into it. And his collection of essays.
Yeah, what is that one? Man, I can't think of it. It's like kind of like he's basically saying like if you disagree with the law, it's kind of up to you to disobey it, and then because then I remember this story about him being in jail for not paying taxes because he didn't agree with it, and then Emerson came and visited him, and he's like, dude, what are you doing in here, dude? Like, we need you out in the world. Like, we don't need you in jail. So it was like, I don't know, it was kind of I appreciated the dueling philosophies of that, but
I do too. I really appreciate the transcendentalists like Dickinson and the whole. I would just love to have been, if I could astral project and go into the records of any timeline, it would be that. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in that room, or even the bohemians from the 50s sitting in a Parisian underground nightclub waxing philosophically, and just those moments in history. I feel so inclined to go and just sit and listen in on.
mine would be like pre-colonial America, just to see like what natives, and obviously not in like some crazy, tribe, but like if you could have one lifetime of just, because people say when they came here, the white man who came here, there's like, the rivers were full of fish. You could like literally walk across the little river, the streams, because they're so full of fish, and there was like the birds were aplenty, the fish were aplenty, and like
This was the land of plenty.
I would love to, and no Western influence, and like just I don't know, I would love to just if I could go back and be sometime like in that.
I would really have loved to have been part of the oh goodness, my brain. Anyway, just the Wild West, the frontier of the last homesteading land races,
Ooh.
of staking your own claim, and then
You want to drive through the
oh my
country on
god, that would have been incredible.
You want to go across the country on a wheels made of wood, and like there's natives shooting arrows at you, and like, ugh. I'd rather be.
And staking your own claim.
That's the thing.
It
I'd rather
being
be
yours, putting your flag up, and being able to do whatever you want with it.
I'd rather live in a time where there is no claiming. This isn't my. It's like, yeah, this is like everyone's land, not like this is property. We claim this. I'd rather have lived when it was like open, and you're like, it's like this is the tribes, not like mine.
Oh yes, most definitely. But
pre-colonial is like I feel like it'd be a little. I would just like to see the country, the beautiful land, because I love America, but I hate the government. I love the land, but so that's why I'd love to see what the land looked like untouched, when there's like no buildings and like no lights at night, and like you just got a little fire and like people you know and love, and I'm like, ooh, that'd be interesting. Yeah, sure, it might be a little. I don't know. It'd just be interesting to see a different way of life, but culturally,
when the land
they got a different story they're enacting.
Yes, when the land was still plentiful. But that reminds me of a poem I need to find for next episode also. When the lands were still plentiful and pure and virginal for the most part. And yeah, I would love to have seen it then, before we came in and ravaged it. And the peoples. I agree.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems I just like because when I was in anthropology, that's what I was fascinated with. That's what I was trying to discover is like different ethoses and ethoses of living, and like philosophies of life, and like the whole Ishmael thing, like what a different culture, like they have a different story they're enacting, like because ours is just kind of like production and domain, and but I like to see when we're like, oh, we're a part of it, like we're not like of it or not above it. So and just to see what that does to your psyche and just other things that develop, and like just listening to nature more. I don't know, because we're the exact opposite of that. But
well, we aren't. But like I keep saying, I'm not in it or of it. I visit it and I flow in and out of it. But I don't like to say we because I don't feel a part of that.
Well, I mean, you can't like.
I can't, of course, that's why I say I flow in and out of it, but I don't feel a part of those spheres of life. I have different spheres of life that I entertain and that I'm a part of. I mean, it's inevitable, right? But what I would really love is, that's why self-sustainability and creating our own community is so important to me. Because I have a different appreciation and a different mindset when it comes to living. And I've never felt a part of that culture or society. I tried it on for a time, but it was a very ill-fitting suit. And I've always just, I was born, basically born in a van and down by the river, and to two dragons. We lived in the dragon wagon. It was called the dragon wagon, and it was painted with two big dragons on the side, and my mom painted an elf pissing on a toadstool on the back, and we traveled from Massachusetts to San Diego. We took a year, I think, to get there, and been on the road basically ever since. So I've never really felt belonging in society, even when I tried to. It didn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to me.
Yeah, me either, but in different ways, but...
Yeah. I like
but I acknowledge
cultivating and creating our own community.
But I acknowledge I'm still like a part of it. Like I'm still in it, amongst it, surrounded by it. But
right, but I don't like to participate. There's nothing for me to participate in, really. But I do. I mean, there are things that I appreciate, like the arts and museum, libraries, concerts. Basically it's everything that has to do with the arts. And of course, in some ways, we're still in the grocery stores, which I would like to do without, but we try every year to get further and further away from that. No. Hopefully it's eventual. That would be nice.
yeah, I mean, do you mean like as in growing your own food, or like in terms of like, getting your meat from like ranchers and stuff? Like, I mean, that's like a big feasible chunk, but
that's my ideal, is getting everything locally from
it's kind of hard to
all of our local farms and creating our own also. Yeah, as much as possible. I mean, that's what we try to do now, but even more. Just every day working towards that goal. I mean, yesterday we went grocery shopping last night because everyone was preoccupied watching the Super Bowl, and I knew we'd be alone in the store, so it would be quiet and peaceful, because that's what this culture does.
Yeah, it was pretty empty. It was so quiet enough. I was this whole just we're us being by the. I hardly. I never. Anytime we're at a store, I never look at the eggs because we have so many chickens. But all I hear online is about this egg shortage and egg price hikeage, and like the egg rack was pretty bare. And I remember I saw this one Indian guy, and I'm like, I thought I was pretty Jewish, but I was watching this guy. He was like looking at all the eggs, and he took an egg out of this one and like put it in. He's like looking at him and put it over there, and I was like, I don't know what he was looking for, but it was just. I don't know. I've never seen that before. It was just so quiet and slow. I was just watching one guy. I was like, "What is he doing?" And then, because I have this theory that Koreans are the Jews of Asia, and that how cheap we are, and like calculated. Like back when we used to go to buffets, I remember thinking about how I'm like, what? How can I get the most, like the per bite, the most like dollar per bite? I'm like, I'm like, don't touch that rice, don't touch the noodles, like basically the cheap carbs. I'm like, gotta get the protein, that's the most expensive. I'm like per like shrimp. I'm like, it's like supermarket sweet, but of the buffet. I'm like, how can I get the most per bite, dollar per bite? Like who thinks like that? DPD.
It's so funny you bring up Jew. It turns out that I'm 13% Eastern European Jew. Just
Don't tell Kanye.
an amalgamation of. Well, I wanted to take a DNA test because there's a lot of. I come from a family of storytellers, and there's a lot of folklore, and there's a lot of. I wanted to settle some things and just get an idea because with storytellers, there's a lot of, you know, exaggeration or hyperbolous
Oh
things,
yeah.
and so.
And then generations of that, you don't know what to believe.
Right. So also, of course, I need my father's blood to really see what's on his side, so I still have questions there, but I wanted to be able to tap in more with my helpful ancestors. And I don't know, I felt initially, of course, I didn't trust it, right? But then I felt it didn't really matter, and I had this needful knowing in myself. And it turns out that things that I had, it was very confirmational because things that I had felt, like Viking blood, like our connection to our heritages. It turns out I'm Norwegian also. You're Swedish. Our last names are incredibly similar. Just being able to tap into my ancestry. I wanted to be able to do that,
Yeah,
especially
roots are important.
through ceremony and very interesting. There was Ukrainian and Russian and Polish and German and
And I think
all Jewish.
as a country, our history is so short of being here. Like, what, 1776? That's like 300 years, and then because I remember hearing there's like pubs in Ireland that are like 1,000 years old, and like they've been owned by the same family, and it's just like we're not, and just the fact that the building's that old, but like we don't like we see a building like, oh, 1920, this building's ancient, and
Oh,
we're
it's
like,
so gorgeous.
but yeah, I think we do have like a longing of our
Yeah.
roots and our history because it's like it's so fractured because we're like
Mm.
whoever our crazy ancestors were to get on a boat and come over here, and like there wasn't like YouTube to look up like how to live in America. It's like just get over here and they tell us it's a promised land, and so I'm
Mm.
like, yeah,
A
that's
lot of
it's
that
crazy
was
thinking
forced
that.
slavery for the workforce also. I know that was in my family, my Scottish and Irish heritage. Um, that was also forced labor. I mean, those were slave ships also.
Well,
People don't really talk about that,
in the
but
Caribbeans there was like 100,000 female and child slaves from Ireland, and that's why they say like Ireland and Jamaican, like their accents are kind of similar. They're like the
right,
way they speak,
right. My
like their
eldest daughter is
incantations
Jamaican.
and.
Yeah, Jamaican, and her grandmother's full on Scottish from Edinburgh. So she's actually my mixed child. This is so ironic. My mixed child is more Scottish than I am. She's actually she's more than half. She's 70% Scottish. That's pretty wild to think about. Yeah. DNA is extraordinary. Ancestry is fascinating, and I'm grateful. I think it also helps speaking to society, or on society. I think with the DNA testing, it really helps people, speaking to what you were speaking about with Western civilization not having culture or mythos or ritual outside of just the warped nature of borrowed holidays and just how bastardized our rituals are, but how I feel like getting in touch with your roots and your DNA, it is helping a lot of people reconnect with their ancient selves and awakening things within that weren't that were dead before.
Yeah, because I like hearing like old accounts of old lifetimes, because you just think of your ancestors and all the like hard shit they went through, and like just to get here for us to all the crazy decisions and synchronicities that happen for like whoever to mate and carry and hold a baby and like just travel around with it and keep us alive, and then for us to be here and like how cushy we have it, and like how honestly I feel like how that almost leads to more depression and like just just the stagnation, the
Yes.
nerf life we live in, because we're so
There's a lot
no
of
hardships, and
disconnection.
and then so like when I try so whenever I think of like when I'm going through something hard, I'm like, I just, not to diminish my own feelings, but like when I think of like, I'm like, dude, my ancestors like did so much crazier shit, and I'm like, I don't know,
Yes,
it's
for you, especially for you to be
maybe
here. There's
laughing at me. I'm like,
10,000 people walking behind you and with you and beside you. And though I don't evoke all of them, I only ask only the helpful. Only the helpful for guidance or yeah. I'm delving deeper into that and exactly what it is that I'm searching for within it, but I think that this is the DNA tests are helping a lot of people do that.
I heard this theory about people doing DNA tests and them collecting all that so they can like create, perfectly genetic specific kind of diseases and stuff, or just like chemical warfare type of stuff, biochemical warfare stuff. I was like, I thought that was interesting, because I've always thought like that's probably the only reason why I haven't done it. Because I'm like, yeah, where is this going? Like, what database is this going to? But so I don't know. I thought that was interesting, especially with
Yeah, I tried to
recent
go with
happenings. But
intuitively what I felt was the lesser of potential evils, but
yeah, 'cause I heard 23andMe is the worst, because I think Google owns it, and I think it was Google,
I
or no,
believe I went with Ancestry.
yeah, I can't.
You bought that for me for my birthday last year, actually. Okay, so
Oh, you're
speaking of
right.
birthdays, I did celebrate my 40th birthday because the reasoning behind that was because I wanted to celebrate all of those who brought me into my 40th year when I really didn't know or think that I would make it to 40. And 40 being such a transitional year, and all the women that I speak with, people that I speak with, that being great milestone in life. Not that it's the year, but there's just an energy around the 40th year. So I normally don't have a party, and I usually spend my time alone or in service. I go horseback riding or give myself a little spa day or something, and I try to volunteer. It's just very quiet, and because it's on Valentine's Day, you guys, so it's pretty lonely anyway, because everyone is busy with everyone else typically, so I get to be alone, and I really relish in my alone time that way. But yeah, anyway, that's what you bought me for my 40th birthday, was a DNA test.
That's right.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Thank you, baby. Thank you for facilitating that.
Yeah, no problem.
Do you still want one?
I do, but yeah, I guess I'm curious about this whole North Korean theory, and then also, yeah, just because I know we have a lot of Swedish side, and then
Yeah.
what was that? My Aunt Deanna was saying like what did she
She's
say, like
German.
English? Oh, German.
And English, yeah. English was a new development that we
Yeah,
weren't
English.
aware of.
Yeah, German. I didn't know that, but
Yeah.
I don't know, because when the older my uncles and my dad got, they almost like they do kind of have like a little Jewish nose, but I'm like, my dad had a ski slope of a nose. I guess that's like a German kind of thing,
You
but
guys look Polish too. Your grandfather looks Polish, like small and has that elven kind of gnomey
yeah, he was a tiny man.
look to him.
I gotta
Like a
speaking of
forest creature.
speaking of ancestry, I remember what my he was in World War II. My grandpa, and they said he wouldn't talk about the war. My uncles and my dad told me, but they said when they got him a little drunk, he would tell some stories. And one story, like, and it harping back to like my ancestors doing stuff that's like crazy, very hard. And they said he was on Normandy on the third day, which pulling up to that beach, and I'm sure there were still just bodies strewn about. But then they're told one story where I forget what they call it, I guess like a scout or something. Like they would march when they're marching in France or wherever the hell they were. They would one guy would be way in the front, and then like, the rest of the group would be in the back, like further back. So when they're walking, like if there's a sniper sees them coming, they shoot the guy in the front, and then the rest of the people know, okay, there's a fucking sniper up there. And they said one time, my grandpa was the guy on the front, and he got shot like in the helmet, but they said it like skimmed his helmet, or like it was just like an inch away from death essentially. Which I remember thinking about that. I was like, man, if that sniper got that guy a little better, I wouldn't be here. But and they said like in his training they told him to play dead, and then so he like played dead, and then I guess the sniper guy came up to him to check on him and see if he was dead, and they said my grandpa, like I don't remember if they said he stabbed him in the stomach, or I think he shot him in the stomach when the Nazi came up to him, and he was just like, "Pew!" And then like, so I can't imagine just that close, and so I don't know. When I think of shit like that, I'm like, holy shit, dude. I'm like here I am like doing what, but then not that I'd ever want to be in a war type situation, but in another story they said like he just goes, you'd be surprised how easy it is for human eyeballs to pop out of the head. And so my Uncle John was like, oh my god, just like trying to imagine that, just
Right.
like squeezing eyes. But
Sometimes my dad would slip also with stories of Vietnam and Korea. And, the old folk, whenever they have a little vulnerable moment and then quickly reel it back in again. That's wild about every time you tell that, it just hits me with the same intensity. Ooh.
I know they talk about like
To
shell
be
shock
to
back
all
then. I'm
these
like, how can you not
men,
be like? You're
all
just
these
like,
men. Yeah, I really am. I'm
or
really
youth.
looking forward to the era of man that lifts up and evolves out of the lower realms of the warrior mindset and warring, and actually gets into the new era, evolved consciousness. It's time, and it's overdue. It's overdue.
Well, I think there's it's good to be like trained and stuff and like capable, but like, yeah, I mean, I don't think most people would hardly do that unless there's some general or someone telling, I don't know how I mean, that's why they like boot camps and stuff is such a brainwashing of a situation of like,
Yes.
you all gotta look alike, shave your head, we just fucking yell and scream at you till you like agree, and they kind of just like, I don't, can you fail boot camp? Do they kick you out if you just like? Because I imagine if I was there,
Yes.
like
They do.
I would purposely tank my skills just to be like, dude, you screaming at me is not how to get your message across to me, dude. Like, you gotta meet me at a human level, but I don't think they don't want that though. They want you to be like,
Well, they have to break
sir,
you.
yes, sir, and like,
That's why I'm a Mustang.
I
I
just,
was
I
unbreakable.
definitely,
I'm trained in hand-to-hand combat.
I would purposely try
I'm
to.
classically trained in Kung Fu, Tai Chi, Qigong. Like, my father was a Kung Fu master, sensei, Eastern medicine philosopher, doctor in that sense. Um, so, like you were talking about being capable. Yes, being well trained. I'm capable.
Yeah, but then there's just a
But
certain level of like to because the whole point of
there's
martial arts is to
the
not use them
philosophy is that yes,
because you see the fight
be
coming like
ready.
miles ahead. You're like, oh, I can skirt this because like I'm not. You don't want to fight. Like it's the whole point.
Precisely. It's to avoid that should be. I remember one time I was so surprised by my dad's reaction, but now I understand it. But one time I broke a kid's nose in school. I was in 7th grade. He had grabbed my ass, and he was a menace. He was actually sexually assaulting many girls in school, and I elbowed him in the nose, and I got suspended for 2 weeks. And I remember my mom was hooting and hollering and was really excited about it, and I was just, that was one extreme of a reaction from my parents. And then my dad found out, and though he was a person who always made it a point to never use the word disappointment, and he was very adamant about parents not using that word or saying that they're disappointed in their children, but he was visibly disappointed in me because he told me now in his stern East Coast way that he was very gentle, but that he was not happy because he knew that being of my training, that there was another way for me to handle that, and I could have very easily, and I let my anger and frustration rule me in that moment instead of my logic and reason.
Well, it's
So that was a
tricky as
big.
like a father. I mean, because I don't know, like if a father to daughter, I'm like, yeah, I don't take that shit from some schmuck, but
Mm-hmm.
then I'm like, I don't know, man, because yeah,
It's a
sexual
very
assault,
double-edged
it's very
sword.
different. I feel like it's different rules for women. I feel like than
Yeah, there's a lot that we have to walk around and deal
because
with
then
that
if you
men
don't,
just don't.
yeah, if you
They
don't
don't
do it,
don't understand because they're not women
if you
naturally.
don't stand at some point, they're just gonna keep, they're gonna take it a step further, and so it's like, yeah, because I remember,
Yeah, we were all pretty
I
sick of this
I
boy.
remember
He was
in
obnoxious
middle
and
school, like when kids
dangerous.
would just like, the boy, other kids would just like purple nipple you and just pinch your nipples, and I fucking hate my nipples being touched. And I remember someone doing it to me, and I remember like, it was kind of reactionary, but just out of anger to let the kid know, like, dude, don't do that to me in the future. So I remember I just socked him in the arm, and so obviously I didn't hit him in the face, but I was just sending my message to like, dude, don't fucking do that anymore. And then he never did, but I feel like if you don't do that, there comes a point of they'll just keep doing it and like keep bullying you essentially. But
So
so
it's
there
a
comes a point of like
situational,
what do you
yeah.
call it? A
Mm-hmm.
board? No, you say it all. Not barriers or borders, but
Boundaries,
boundaries. Yeah, you're just like you're crossing it. I'm
right? Precisely. So my boundary, I was violated, and I reacted. But the whole point was that I was reactionary instead of responsive.
yeah. Well, he just did it. And you just immediately elbowed him. Like
Yeah, it was instinct. It was just
yeah,
yeah. It was more of a, what would you call it? Anyway,
yeah,
yeah. It was
reactionary.
it was it was instinctual, an impulse. But that's what I'm saying is that we can rise above our impulses and especially our violent tendencies as a whole, as people, and especially as men. There are more intelligent ways to to approach conflict,
Yeah, I remember being in.
right? And especially now that in the modern age that it's all backed by uh, it's all monetarily backed too. It's all for profit in some ways. Anyway, military industrial complex.
Yeah, I remember being in
I really
fifth
don't want to get
grade
into that
when.
though.
Oh, okay.
No, no, no. Please do. You have a story?
No, not anymore.
Why not? In fifth grade, what?
You just said you didn't want to get into it. And it's about 9/11 and the military, so I
Oh,
don't know.
yeah. Just speaking to being very cognizant of where I direct my energy now because I'm evolving into the understanding and knowing of how powerful my attention is. So I'd rather speak to the things that I want to see more. And I want more in the world because that's my place and that's my position and my path.
Yeah, it's trickier for me as a comic. I'm like, yeah, observation. Like, isn't this weird? Or like, this is a weird thing. Like, does anyone else not see
Mm,
how weird, like, abnormal this is? But I get what
yes,
you're saying. But
yes. This is beautiful too. That's I looking
what's the
at
deal with airplane peanuts?
social commentary is part of you being the jester, of you being the court jester, of you being the fool. And that's, and I mean, being a son of laughter, that's in both of our heritages, and speaking of our ancient DNA and of our our power and purpose. So yeah, but I'm just taking a different approach with it. Mm-hmm. I really dig that you're using this platform to bring awareness.
Well, the podcast.
No, the platform, the stage,
Oh,
comedy, your true
well,
calling.
it's more personal stuff. It's not. I mean, here and there, there's some social kind of stuff, but
I think it all starts that way through personal story. Everything begins that way. This podcast is beginning that way.
it's not really related. But I heard someone talking about what's the difference between a comic and a comedian. and they said a comic, kind of says funny stuff, like one-liner joke type of thing, and a comedian says something not funny and then talks about that and makes it funny. I thought that was a good,
Uh,
interesting
like,
difference. Because I remember people,
yeah,
yeah, like,
like
what's a comic,
Uncle
comedian?
Carlin.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely a comedian. But like, like the Mitch Hedberg's, like that's a comic, like, you know, very punchy one-liners type of stuff. But I
Mm.
thought it was an interesting distinction.
Yeah, I appreciate, especially bringing back in the Viking way and the medicine way, that the medicine people of a lot of the cultures of my people were also the fools. They were the bringers of the psychedelic medicines, and also were able and allowed to say, comment, be the commentary for the tribe, and say and do anything they wanted, because they knew that, because that was their place, was to bring that sort of truth through laughter, and truth through sometimes even harsh and violent medicine.
Well, remember the Heyoka? I think that's her name. It's like the
Yes,
Lakota people's sacred clown. Like
yes,
they would do stuff to like, just kind of remind you guys, like, hey, you don't take things too seriously. I know this is like our thing. Like
mm-hmm.
specifically, I remember certain, if they're doing like, I don't remember the exact ritual they're doing, but everyone would be going clockwise in a circle, and then the Heyoka would go counterclockwise, just and they let them,
Yes,
just like, hey, show like you don't have to do, like this is a little thing everyone's believing, and then or ride backwards on a horse or stuff like that.
mm-hmm.
But
The absurdity. There's medicine in the absurdity.
yeah, and just to not a dissenter, but yeah, just to just a reminder of like like nothing's happening to me just because I'm not doing what you're doing, kind of thing. Like
I've always been that misfit.
kind of reminds me of like I don't want to talk too much about kids, but just
Hmm.
with the Izzy, just like road trauma, like
Mm-hmm.
and she had trauma trying to cross the road because her dog got hit by her car, and then I remember just being when I was trying to get her to, we were riding by, I was on foot at first, but just to cross the road, it was somewhat busy intersection, and then street, and then I clearly was looking like no cars here, no cars here, and I'd stand in the middle, and I was like, look, I'm perfectly safe, like nothing's gonna happen, and then like I didn't push her, and then she's like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't, I'm not ready, and then so I came back, and we went back home, and then the next day. I don't remember how many times after that, but then yeah, eventually then she stood in there, and then we crossed, and then, but just the
Well, I'm really grateful for your being a threshold guardian, and that for her outside of myself that she could trust.
yeah, I mean same with the dog Alpha, like same,
Mm-hmm.
like obviously she had trauma with men, and
Yeah.
I remember just
You've been like that with all of us females here,
yeah,
with
I
all
guess
of us
so. Like
women.
sitting, I just remember like trying to get her to. I would just sit by her food bowl, and like I would purposely put food in there she'd want, and then I remember she was so traumatized. She would see me there, and she'd like go around the corner, and like see, and then hide like 10 seconds, and then she'd just poke her head out and see I'm still there, and she's like, I don't remember if she made a sound or not, but then she'd like
Right.
hide back again, and then 20 seconds later she'd poke her head back out, and oh, I'm still here, and then. And it took so long to like coax her to like be fine, to just to eat in front of me, and then eventually just to even like touch her while she's even. Sometimes it's even like when I
Yes.
touch her when she's eating, she's just like, "Ugh," like it's all tight, and then so yeah, that
The patience and the care of your balanced masculine energy with a household of women that had PTSD and CPTSD trauma, if you want to put a label on it, but that's relatable to people. Uh, we had all experienced extreme um, domestic violence in in our adopted dog. She was an emotional support animal that we had rescued, and she had obviously had endured male violence. And I never heard her make a peep ever. She, not even a whisper, not even a whine, nothing, before B came and moved in with us.
yeah, I
And he
remember that
started
that day
working with her
clearly.
personally.
Just
What
playing with
was
her, and
gorgeous about your energy
you're like, what
is
was that?
being this, like I said, a threshold guardian in healing and being purposeful in that through your own balanced and checked masculine and feminine, that balance that you had in yourself, so that you were a trusted masculine energy in the home. Because then one day, I believe I was getting ready for work, and I was in the bathroom, and I heard a dog making all sorts of racket, and I was like, is someone at the door? Did someone bring a dog to the house? And at the time, I was like, no, my friends don't bring dogs over. They know that she doesn't get along with other dogs. She's a human kind of creature. And I go out there, and she's just having a ball playing with you, barking and howling, and
Yeah.
and just
I remember I
and
was
I
like, what's
used
the
to
big
play with
deal?
her all the time, and we would wrestle and stuff, and she would play with other dogs at the dog park. But even then, she never made a sound. And then we couldn't get her to shut up. Every time he came in the door,
Oh, no, I created a monster now.
she likes to prove and show to him that
Yeah.
she's, protective, and that she's vocal, and that she's invoked this masculine energy in herself, and to make daddy proud. And so she honors him by barking up a
Yeah.
storm every time you enter the
She
house.
won't
No.
stop until I pet her. And she's like, but then she's like, "Roar,"
Yeah.
and but
Isn't
yeah,
that gorgeous? That's a gorgeous lesson for men, to be a safe space and a safe haven for women, especially whenever there's been chronic abuse involved.
yeah.
Just to be gentle and to be patient,
Well, I heard this.
and
Oh, sorry.
to allow, to create the safe space, and to be the safety, so that we can come to you with our vulnerability, so that we can open to you, so that we can bloom to you. And
Bonobo style.
it's not out of force. It's not out of violence. It's not out of aggression. It's out of a very balanced masculine and feminine, with equalities within yourself, so that the woman feels safe. Make her feel safe.
Yeah,
And
that is
then
very
she will come to you.
bonobo-esque, like what we're talking about in the first hour about. Yeah, like the male, not appeasing, but just fitting into the female group, and then yeah, obviously if you act out of line, that's when they're like, no, you need to go. Like you're not fitting in. Versus like, okay, he's like helping us, and also I heard about like dogs, how they're kind of like a micro version of life for us, because like generally we get them as puppies, little babies, and then they grow up, and then by the time and then they're old and like dragging their hips, and so it's like a very sped up process of life and death, and then
Yes.
so and for to see her like trauma and like healing, and then like so
Yeah.
it's a lot more quicker of a scale than for a human. It's like way years, so it's like harder to picture it and like to reflect on it. But yeah, like animals are,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, especially specifically dogs, they're way more reflective of like life for us, micro scales.
Yeah, the microcosm of the life, or the death process. Being in dualship with the death of our dog together was all of us together being death doulas for our animal, and ushering her into the new phase, onto the new path together, was such a rite of passage for all of us, and like this bonding
Well, it was a
experience
weird
in the
time
beginning.
too, because I had like 5 like animal deaths in that like a month time, and not like
Mm-hmm.
one was like it was like a kitten or a puppy somewhere else, and then like there was one was like a squirrel and like a bird too, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, man, what is with all this like death? Like maybe this is symbolic of like a passing of a phase of life or something. But yeah, I remember seeing. I was like, man, this is like a recurring theme.
Yeah, definitely. At the time, I was
A little
experiencing a
dog
lot
died on
of
my
death
chest.
of cycles, and collapsing of timelines as well. So it was, everything, like I always say, everything is a mirror for another, and then also energetically symbolic for allowing more life to enter into a new phase of the path.